Elder Zephyrian walked slowly into the great council chamber. His old body moved carefully across the smooth floor. The chamber was huge, with seats for thousands of alien species from across the galaxy. Today, representatives from over 200 worlds had come to hear his words. The ancient being had lived for over 3,000 years. He had seen civilizations rise from primitive mud huts to great space empires. He had watched proud species fall into dust and forgotten history. But today he felt more worried than he had ever felt before. "My fellow council members," Zephyrian began, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I come before you with a warning about a newly discovered species. They call themselves humans, and they live on a small blue planet called Terra in the Outer Rim." General Vextar of the Carathian hegemony laughed loudly. His red skin gleamed under the chamber lights and his forearms crossed over his chest. The Carathians were famous warriors who had conquered 17 star systems in just 100 years. They were strong, fast, and had the best weapons in the galaxy. "Old One," Vextar said with a grin, "what could possibly worry you about such a primitive species? Our scouts tell us they barely have chemical rockets. They fight with metal bullets and crude explosives. They cannot even leave their own solar system properly." Other delegates nodded in agreement. The Trilaxian ambassador, a tall blue creature with tentacles for arms, spoke up. "Our analysis shows they are constantly fighting among themselves. They are divided into nearly 200 separate nations. They wage war over resources, land, and even ideas. How could such a chaotic species threaten anyone?" Zephyrian raised one of his crystalline hands for silence. "That is exactly what makes them dangerous. Let me tell you what I have learned about these humans." He activated a holographic display that showed images of Earth. Cities sprawled across continents, connected by roads and railways. Ships moved across vast oceans while aircraft filled the skies. On the surface, they appear weak. Zephyrian continued. "Individual humans are fragile. They have no natural armor, no claws, no poison. They live for less than 100 years, which is nothing compared to most of us, but look closer." The display changed to show human history. Wars, disasters, and struggles filled the images, but also recovery, rebuilding, and progress. These humans have survived ice ages that would have destroyed most species. They have endured plagues that killed millions, yet they always came back stronger. They turn everything into a weapon when threatened. Farming tools become spears. Kitchen knives become daggers. Even their children's toys can be made dangerous. Ambassador Kethvar from the peaceful Velthian Republic shook his head. "Surely you exaggerate, Elder. All species fight for survival. What makes these humans special?" "Their response to impossible odds," Zephyrian replied. "Most species, when faced with certain defeat, will surrender to preserve their lives. Humans do something different. They become more dangerous the more desperate they become." The hologram showed images of human conflicts throughout history, small groups of humans fighting against overwhelming odds, cities under siege that refused to surrender even when starving, soldiers who kept fighting even when wounded. "They have a saying," Zephyrian said quietly. "They say that the most dangerous place in the universe is between a human and something they want to protect. I have studied their wars. When they fight for their families, their homes, or their ideals, they become something else entirely." General Vextar stood up, his massive frame towering over his seat. "Respected Elder, with all due respect, you speak of ancient history and primitive conflicts. Modern warfare is about technology, strategy, and superior firepower. These humans have none of these advantages." "That is what worries me most," Zephyrian said. "They are brilliant at adaptation. In their most recent global conflict, they went from fighting with single-shot rifles to building weapons that could destroy entire cities in just 6 years. They learn, they adapt, and they never give up." The chamber filled with whispers and discussions. Some delegates seemed concerned, but most appeared skeptical. The humans seemed so far behind technologically that they posed no real threat to advanced civilizations. Furthermore, Zephyrian continued, they have something most species lose as they advance. They still remember how to be ruthless when necessary. Civilized species follow rules of war, codes of honor, and moral boundaries. Humans will follow these rules until their survival is threatened. Then they throw away every rule and fight with pure determination. He paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces. I have seen species with better technology, stronger bodies, and longer lives fall to weaker enemies because they underestimated their determination. Humans have that same determination, but amplified beyond anything I have ever encountered. A young delegate from the Nexarian Empire raised a tentacle. What do you suggest we do, Elder? Should we avoid contact with them entirely? I suggest we observe them carefully, Zephyrian replied. Study them, understand them, but do not threaten them unless you are prepared for a war unlike anything you have ever experienced. Most importantly, if any species chooses to attack them, they should remember this warning. Humans become most dangerous when they have nothing left to lose. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered his words. Most still believed the old being was being overly cautious about a primitive species. They could not imagine how such backward creatures could threaten their advanced civilizations. Time would prove how wrong they were. 6 months had passed since Elder Zephyrian's warning. To the Galactic Council, General Vexitar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching 300 Karathian warships move toward the small blue planet called Earth. His red skin gleamed with satisfaction as he prepared to add another conquest to his long list of victories. Begin the attack, he commanded his officers. Target their major population centers first. Show them our power and they will surrender quickly. The first wave of plasma beams struck Earth's major cities. Buildings crumbled and fires spread across urban areas. But instead of the expected panic and immediate surrender, something strange happened. The humans did not run away screaming. They did not broadcast messages begging for mercy. In Seoul, a young man named Lee Jiho was walking home from work when the sky suddenly filled with alien ships. Instead of hiding, he grabbed an emergency bag he kept ready and ran toward the nearest military station. Along the way, he helped injured people and organized other civilians to find shelter. The Karathian ground forces landed expecting to find a broken, terrified population. Instead, they found humans who seemed angry rather than afraid. Old women threw bottles filled with burning liquid at their vehicles. Children used slingshots to break equipment. Even wounded humans crawled toward alien soldiers with improvised weapons. General Vexitar received the first disturbing reports from his ground commanders. Sir, the humans are not behaving as expected. They fight in ways we have never seen before. They use their own bodies as weapons. They turn everything around them into tools for battle. In Busan, an engineer named Choi Minji examined the wreckage of a crashed Karathian fighter. Instead of being afraid of the alien technology, she carefully took it apart to understand how it worked. Within hours, she had figured out the basic principles of their energy weapons and began teaching other humans how to build similar devices. The Karathian military doctrine was based on quick, overwhelming strikes that broke enemy morale. They would destroy key targets, demand surrender, and then integrate the defeated species into their empire. It had worked on dozens of other worlds. But Earth was different. Captain Park Sun-woo of the South Korean military found himself working with soldiers from countries that had been enemies just days before. Americans, Russians, Chinese, and Europeans all fought side by side against the alien invaders. National boundaries seemed to disappear overnight as humans united against the common threat. This is impossible, muttered Commander Thekvor as he read reports from invasion sites around the globe. The humans are actually becoming more organized under attack. Our intelligence said they were divided into competing nations. Now they act like a single military force. The Karathians had expected to face professional armies with clear command structures that could be defeated or captured. Instead, they fought against an entire population that seemed to have turned into soldiers overnight. Farmers used their tractors as weapons. Factory workers converted their machines to build bombs. Even children contributed by carrying messages and supplies to fighters. Dr. Yang Suyong worked in a hidden laboratory deep underground, studying captured alien weapons with scientists from around the world. They shared information instantly through communication networks the Karathians had failed to destroy. What should have taken years of research was accomplished in weeks through desperate cooperation. The most disturbing reports came from Carathian soldiers who tried to secure captured territory. They could not hold any ground because human resistance never stopped. Even in areas where all military forces had been defeated, civilians continued to attack using methods that seemed to come from nowhere. Grandmother Song Ayun, 73 years old, had never been a soldier. But when aliens occupied her neighborhood, she began making explosives in her kitchen using household chemicals. She taught other elderly people her techniques, creating a network of unexpected fighters that the Carathians never anticipated. General Vextar studied tactical reports that made no sense to him. How can they coordinate so effectively? We destroyed their communication centers and government buildings. Yet they respond to our movements as if they share a single mind. The truth was that humans had learned to fight without traditional command structures. They used social media, amateur radio, and even simple word of mouth to share information. When formal leadership was eliminated, new leaders emerged from unexpected places. Kim Dae-ho was just 16 years old and worked in his family's small store. But he had spent years learning about computers and electronics. When the invasion began, he hacked into alien communication systems and began broadcasting their positions to human resistance fighters. Teenagers around the world did the same, creating an intelligence network the Carathians could not break. After 3 months of fighting, the Carathian invasion force had lost more ships and soldiers than in their previous 5 conquests combined. They controlled no territory on Earth, faced constant attacks, and could not understand how such a primitive species was defeating their advanced military. "Sir," reported his chief tactical officer, "our psychological warfare specialists say the humans show no signs of breaking. If anything, they seem to be getting stronger and more coordinated as the conflict continues." General Vextar looked at the reports of human tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They used their own spacecraft as missiles. They poisoned water supplies in areas they abandoned. They fought to the death rather than surrender, even when defeat was certain. For the first time in his military career, Vextar began to understand what Elder Zephyrian had tried to warn them about. These humans were not like other species. They became more dangerous when threatened, not less. The war was just beginning, and already the Carathians were learning that conquering Earth would be nothing like their previous victories. General Vextar stood in his command center, staring at the holographic display showing Earth. 6 months of fighting had passed, and his invasion force was no closer to victory than when they first arrived. Frustration burned in his chest like acid. The Carathian Empire had never failed to conquer a world, especially one as primitive as Earth. "These humans are like insects," he growled to his officers. "No matter how many we kill, more keep appearing. It is time to show them what real power looks like." His decision would prove to be the worst mistake in Carathian military history. Vextar ordered the complete destruction of 3 major human cities, New York, London, and Tokyo. Massive plasma bombardments turned millions of people into ash in seconds. The general believed this act of terror would finally break human resistance. Ayub could not have been more wrong. In a hidden bunker beneath the ruins of Seoul, Lim Jae-hyuk received the news of the city destructions. The former university professor had become a resistance coordinator, connecting scattered human fighters across the globe. When he heard about the murdered civilians, something changed in his eyes. Something cold and dangerous. "Send word to all cells," he said quietly to his communication team. "The gloves are off. No more rules. No more mercy." The message spread through hidden networks faster than wildfire. Around the world, human resistance groups that had been fighting separately suddenly began working together with terrifying efficiency. What the Carathians had just witnessed was not humanity at war. That was about to change. Dr. Shin Hyejin worked in an underground laboratory that the aliens had never found. She was a gentle woman who had spent her life developing medical equipment to save lives. But after seeing images of the destroyed cities, she turned her brilliant mind to creating weapons. Her team began producing devices that combined human creativity with captured alien technology in ways that made hardened soldiers sick to their stomachs. The first sign that something had changed came 3 days later. Carathian patrol units began disappearing without sending distress signals. When search teams found the wreckage, they discovered their comrades had been killed by weapons that seemed impossible. Humans were using alien plasma rifles, but modified, in ways that created new types of destruction. Nurse Kang Suman had spent months caring for wounded resistance fighters in a hidden medical station. She was known for her gentle hands and kind words. But after the city murders, she began seeing patients who refused to stay in bed, despite horrific injuries. Men and women with broken bones, severe burns, and missing limbs demanded to return to fighting. "I can still hold a weapon," gasped one fighter with bandages covering half his face. "My family lived in Tokyo. I have nothing left but revenge." Similar scenes played out in medical stations around the world. Humans who should have been dead or disabled continued fighting with determination that terrified their alien enemies. Carathian soldiers began reporting encounters with humans who seemed to feel no pain, who fought until their bodies simply stopped working. The psychological impact on the Carathian forces was devastating. They had been taught that all intelligent species valued their own lives above everything else. But humans seemed to have abandoned self-preservation entirely. They turned their own vehicles into bombs, crashed their aircraft into alien ships, and fought with kitchen knives when they ran out of proper weapons. Oh Taejun had been a commercial airline pilot before the invasion. Now he led suicide missions using civilian aircraft loaded with explosives and captured alien power sources. His squadron of former pilots, bus drivers, and taxi operators flew impossible missions against targets that military experts said could not be attacked. "We are not trying to survive this war," he explained to a new volunteer. "We are trying to make sure our children have a world to grow up in. That is worth any sacrifice." The Carathians discovered that their honor-based military culture had not prepared them for this type of conflict. They followed rules of engagement that humans ignored completely. They tried to avoid civilian casualties while humans used every civilian as a potential fighter. They attempted to hold territory while humans made every building into a trap. What disturbed General Vextar most were the reports about human prisoners. Captured humans were supposed to provide intelligence about resistance operations. Instead, prisoners like former teacher Bae Ji-young somehow gathered information about their captors and transmitted it back to human forces. Even under torture, they revealed nothing useful while learning everything they could about Carathian weaknesses. "How is this possible?" Vextar demanded of his intelligence officers. "We use the most advanced interrogation techniques in the galaxy. These primitives should break within hours." "Sir," replied his chief interrogator, "they seem to view capture as another form of combat. They treat pain as information to be endured rather than avoided. Some actually volunteer for capture, missions to gather intelligence about us." The war had transformed from a simple conquest into a nightmare that haunted Carathian soldiers. They faced an enemy that turned every defeat into motivation for greater resistance. Humans who lost their families became more dangerous, not less. Communities that were destroyed spawned new resistance cells from the survivors. Engineer Han Kyung-ho worked with international teams to create weapons that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They weaponized their own orbital debris, turning space junk into guided missiles. They converted mining equipment into planet-shaking bombs. They even figured out how to hack Carathian communication networks and feed false information to alien commanders. The beast that Elder Zephyrian had warned about was finally awake, and it was hungry for alien blood. The war had been raging for 8 months when everything changed. What started as a simple conquest had become a nightmare that haunted every Carathian soldier. The humans had shown them something that would forever change how the galaxy viewed warfare, the concept of total war. Captain Yoon Min-jae stood on the bridge of what had once been a Carathian destroyer. The ship now flew under human control, its alien crew either dead or captured. Around him, former car mechanics and computer programmers operated alien technology as if they had been born to it. This was impossible by all known laws of technological adaptation, yet it was happening. "Target acquired," announced Jo Yoonbi, a young woman who had been fixing smartphones just 9 months ago. Now she controlled weapons systems that could level mountains. 3 Carathian cruisers approaching from the dark side of the moon. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries. Humans used captured alien ships to attack other alien ships, but they did not fight like the Carathians expected. They used tactics that no civilized species would consider, turning their own vessels into guided missiles when ammunition ran low. On Earth, engineer Han Kyung-ho worked in a factory that had once built automobiles. Now it produced weapons that combined human innovation with alien technology in ways that created entirely new categories of destruction. The humans had taken the Carathians' advanced plasma technology and somehow made it more deadly by adding their own crude but effective modifications. The enemy believes in clean warfare, Han explained to his team as they worked on their latest creation. They think there are rules that everyone should follow. We will show them what happens when those rules no longer apply. The weapon they built was a plasma cannon powered by a human nuclear reactor and controlled by a video game system. It should not have worked according to any scientific principle, but it could punch through Carathian shields like paper. More importantly, it cost almost nothing to build compared to proper alien weapons. In underground command centers around the world, Colonel Nam Seok-jin coordinated with resistance leaders who had once been teachers, doctors, and store clerks. The formal governments of Earth had been destroyed in the first weeks of fighting, but something better had replaced them. Humanity had become a single organism focused on one goal, making the aliens regret ever coming to their world. Status. Report from all sectors, Nam requested during his daily briefing. North America has completed conversion of their satellite network into orbital weapons, reported a voice from the hidden speakers. Europe has finished their underground factory network. Asia has successfully hacked 70% of enemy communication systems. The Carathians slowly realized they were no longer fighting a primitive species trying to defend itself. They were fighting an entire world that had transformed into a weapon designed specifically to destroy them. Every human had become part of a war machine that operated on principles the aliens could not understand. Medic Seo Yuna treated wounded fighters in a hospital built inside an abandoned subway tunnel. The patients she cared for should have been broken by months of impossible fighting. Instead, they shared stories of alien weaknesses they had discovered during battles. Every human who survived a fight returned with new knowledge about how to kill their enemies more effectively. The tall ones with 4 arms move slower in Earth gravity, explained a fighter with burns covering half his body. Their armor has weak points at the joints. Their weapons overheat after sustained fire. I counted their reload times. This information spread through human networks faster than the aliens could adapt. What the Carathians had not understood was that humans treated every battle as a learning experience. They studied their enemies with the same intensity they once used to study science or business, then shared that knowledge with everyone who could use it. The turning point came during what became known as the Moon Base Assault. Pilot Oh Tae-jun led a mixed force of captured alien fighters and modified human spacecraft against the Carathian staging area on Earth's moon. The attack should have been suicide, but humans had stopped caring about survival months ago. Remember, Tae-jun broadcast to his squadron. We are not trying to come home. We are trying to send a message. The message was delivered with nuclear weapons strapped to civilian spacecraft piloted by volunteers who had lost everything. The Carathian moon base disappeared in flames that could be seen from Earth. But more importantly, the attack proved that humans could strike anywhere in their own solar system. Dr. Hwang Mi-kyung worked with scientists from around the world to reverse engineer alien technology at a pace that should have been impossible. They achieved in months what should have taken decades, driven by desperation and unlimited cooperation. National secrets and corporate patents meant nothing when the survival of the species was at stake. The Carathians began receiving reports that made no sense to their military minds. Human forces were operating in ways that violated every principle of logical warfare. They sacrificed valuable resources for psychological victories. They attacked targets that had no strategic value but maximum symbolic importance. They seemed to fight for the simple pleasure of causing their enemies pain. General Vextar read the daily reports with growing horror. His invasion force had lost nearly a third of its ships and half its ground troops. They controlled no territory on Earth and could not even maintain secure positions in space. Worse, his soldiers were beginning to break psychologically under the strain of fighting an enemy that seemed to enjoy suffering. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the humans have begun broadcasting our casualty reports on all frequencies. They want us to know exactly how many of our people they have killed." The tide had turned, and the Carathians were drowning. General Vextar stood in his command center for the last time, staring at casualty reports that made his stomach turn. 12 months had passed since the invasion began. What should have been a quick conquest had become the worst military disaster in Carathian history. Of his original 300 warships, only 200 remained operational. 40,000 of his finest soldiers were dead or missing. "Begin full withdrawal," he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "All ships return to the fleet immediately. We are leaving this cursed world." The retreat was swift and absolute. Within 72 hours, every Carathian vessel had fled Earth's solar system. Behind them, they left a human species that had been forever changed by war. The frightened, divided world they had first observed no longer existed. On Earth, firefighter Choi Woo-shik helped pull survivors from the rubble of destroyed cities. His hands were scarred from months of fighting with improvised weapons, but now he used them to save lives instead of taking them. Around him, other humans began the slow process of rebuilding their world. "We won," said Dr. Lee Mi-young as she treated injured civilians in a makeshift hospital. Her voice carried no joy, only exhaustion. The victory had cost humanity dearly. 50 million people had died in the fighting. Entire cities lay in ruins. But they had proven something that would change the galaxy forever. The news of humanity's victory spread through alien communication networks faster than light itself. Species that had dismissed Elder Zephyrian's warning now understood why the ancient being had seemed so concerned. The humans had not just defeated a superior force. They had done it in ways that challenged every assumption about warfare and civilization. Ambassador Kethvar of the Velthian Republic was the first alien diplomat to request a meeting with human leaders. He arrived at the ruins of New York 3 months after the Carathian withdrawal, his peaceful species ship broadcasting friendship signals on all frequencies. The human who met him was Kim Young-ho, a former history teacher who had become Earth's primary negotiator through months of coordinating resistance efforts. Kethvar had expected to meet with military leaders or politicians. Instead, he faced a quiet man with tired eyes who had learned diplomacy in underground bunkers. "Why did you fight so hard?" Kethvar asked during their first meeting. "Our analysts calculated that surrender would have saved millions of lives. The Carathians typically treat conquered species well if they submit quickly." Kim Young-ho was silent for a long moment, looking out at the damaged city around them. Construction crews worked to rebuild what the war had destroyed, but the scars would remain for generations. "You do not understand humans," Kim finally replied. "We did not fight because we thought we could win. We fought because we could not accept losing." This simple statement would be quoted in diplomatic circles for centuries to come. It perfectly captured something about humanity that other species found both admirable and terrifying. The Galactic Council held an emergency session 2 weeks after first contact with post-war humanity. Elder Zephyrian sat in his ancient seat, feeling no satisfaction at being proven right. The warning he had given had been ignored, and now the galaxy faced a new reality. The humans have proven themselves capable of defeating technologically superior forces through sheer determination, announced the council speaker. "We must establish new protocols for dealing with this species." The classification they created was unprecedented in galactic history. Extreme caution advised. Do not engage without overwhelming force. But even more significant was the cultural impact of humanity's victory. Young species across the galaxy began studying human tactics and philosophy, learning that technological superiority was not always decisive. General Vextar faced a military tribunal on his home world, but the charges against him were quietly dropped. The Carathian High Command had reviewed his reports and concluded that no general could have won the war the humans forced them to fight. The enemy had simply refused to follow any rules that would have made victory possible. His final report remained classified for decades, but portions eventually leaked to the galactic press. The most quoted section read, "Humans become most dangerous when they have nothing left to lose. They fight not just with weapons but with a determination that borders on insanity. I recommend that no species ever attempt to conquer their world unless prepared to exterminate them completely." Dr. Yang Suyong continued her research into alien technology, but now she worked on peaceful applications. The defensive systems she developed from captured Carathian equipment made Earth nearly impossible to attack by conventional means. More importantly, her work proved that humans could adapt alien science for their own purposes with terrifying speed. 5 years after the war ended, humanity launched its first interstellar colony ship. The vessel used technology that combined human engineering with alien science in ways that created entirely new possibilities for space travel. Other species watched nervously as humans began spreading beyond their home system. The galaxy had learned several important lessons from the war. First, that technological advancement did not guarantee military success. Second, that some species would rather die than surrender their freedom. And most importantly, that humans were not the primitive, harmless creatures they appeared to be. When alien children now learned about the great battles of galactic history, they were taught about the species that defeated a superior enemy through pure stubbornness. The humans had become a legend, proof that sometimes the most dangerous opponent was the one who refused to accept that they were supposed to lose. The war was over, but its consequences would shape galactic politics for generations to come.